Good afternoon, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're really excited to be celebrating Pride Month with all of you around the world, and especially to be bringing you this really important conversation, which is a literary approach to intersex justice. I'm going to introduce our co-panelists today. And then we're going to get right into it because I'm really excited about this conversation, about these books, and about this activism. So the person who kind of put this idea into my head is Sean Saifa Wall. He uses he, him, and his pronouns, and he is a Black queer intersex activist, somatic practitioner, and rising scholar. He is currently pursuing his PhD at the University of Huddersfield as a Marie Skłodowska-Curie Fellow examining the erasure of intersex people from social policy in Ireland and England. Saifa is committed to racial equity and a radical vision of bodily autonomy for intersex folks. As a co-founder of the Intersex Justice Project, a grassroots initiative by intersex people of color, he is determined to end intersex genital surgery in the US. When he's not trying to preserve brain cells for his program, you can find him chilling with his dog, Justice Tigers. So we're thrilled to have Saifa here with us and to have him kind of be the one who pulled this together with us. And he invited I.W. Gregorio, also known as Ilene, who uses she, her, hers pronouns. Ilene is a practicing urologist by day, a masked avenging YA writer by night. She's the author of the Schneider Award-winning This Is My Brain in Love, which is an Amazon editor's pick, a Sibelius Award finalist, and a Nebo Windows and Mirrors book selection. After getting her MD, she did her residency at Stanford, where she met the intersex patient who inspired her debut novel, None of the Above, which is a Lambda Award finalist, a Publishers Weekly Flying Start, and an ALA Rainbow List selection. She is proud to be a board member of Interact, Advocates for Intersex Youth, and is a founding member of We Need Diverse Books. Her essays have been published in Newsweek, The Washington Post, The San Francisco Chronicle, The Philadelphia Inquirer, and Scientific American, among others. You can find her online at www.iwgregorio.com and on Twitter and Instagram at iwgregorio. And last but not least, we have Sol Santana, who also uses she, her, hers pronouns and is the author of the forthcoming book, Just Ash, which I've put in the chat. You can order from us directly. It's a pre-order because it comes out in October. She is pursuing a master's in early childhood education, and we are thrilled to have her joining this canon of intersex literature. So I'm going to get out of the way. I want to let folks know you can ask questions via this Ask a Question button at the bottom center of your screen, or you can put them in the chat, and I'll make sure they get over into that area. So welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for being here. We're thrilled to get to celebrate Pride Month with all of you.
Yay. Charis is the best, by the way. Thank you for having us.
All right, I think, okay, this is a new platform, so I'm just like, whoo, just navigating. Thank you, ER, for the introduction. I am so glad to be in conversation with Sol and with Ilene. This is really exciting. For folks who are here, it feels kind of weird to not see anybody and not see or know that people are here. So if you can just drop, who you are, where you're coming from in the chat as a way of just being like, hey, my name is Frank. I'm from Atlanta, or my name is Frank. I'm from Florida, wherever. That'd be great. I was thinking before we start the panel, I think it would be great just to do a centering exercise. As ER mentioned, I'm a somatic practitioner, having learned somatic awareness with the organization Generative Somatics, that is based in the Bay Area in California. And usually I do centering as a way of just kind of arriving into the space, because I know that it has been a year and some change for a lot of people. We have been in various states of lockdown, various states of fear, having lost people some of us probably have survived COVID, and we have had to rely a lot on sort of video as a medium for communicating. So I think some of us may be burned out. I know sometimes I get burned out by these calls. And I think sometimes for me, whenever I do these calls, it's a way of connecting with myself and connecting with others. So this is a, consent space, a brave space around consent. People can participate or not. But I'm going to ask the panelists if you would center with me. And for those who are interested, if we can center together.
Okay.
All right. So if you're sitting or standing, I'm going to invite you to kind of place your feet about hip-width distance apart.
Okay.
And if you can just start noticing from the crown of your head to the sole of your feet, just start taking account or inventory of the sensations that are happening in your body. You may notice that there is tightness, there may be pain, there may be joy, there may be any number of sensations that you're feeling as you allow yourself to slow down. And I know we hold tension in different places. Some of us hold tension in our eyebrows. Some of us hold tension in our jaw, sometimes in our butt cheeks, sometimes in our shoulders. So if you can, if you hold tension in your jaw, just let it go. If you're feeling some tension in your brow, just kind of smooth out your brows. And we all have different bodies. So kind of just allow the bones in your spine to stack how they will, to allow more breathing into your center. So our center is about 2 inches below the belly button. So if you want to put a hand there, please do so. So we center in 3 directions. We center in our length, which we associate with dignity. We center in our width, which we associate with expansiveness. And we center in our depth, which we associate with ancestry and legacy. We center for the purpose of getting connected to ourselves, the land, and to spirit. So I invite you to center in this length. And for the centering practice, I'm going to ask us to keep our eyes open or keep them low, to stay connected to ourselves and to our environment. So we center in our length. So if you can, imagine that your body is a tree, your feet being the roots of that tree, your body being the trunk, and your head being a canopy. That tree can be planted anywhere. That tree can be in your backyard. It can be in the most beautiful place that you visited. We associate this with dignity. And as Black people, as people of color, queer folks, those of us who are disabled, migrant folks, immigrant folks, and the multiple identities that we inhabit, there are moments in our lives when our dignity is taken away. So how in this moment can you reclaim your dignity? What does it mean to occupy more space in your dignity? So from center, we center in our width, which we associate with expansiveness. And these are the boundaries between me and you, where I end and where you begin, and where you begin and I end. So if you can actually feel into the space between your feet, between your legs, between your hips, between your shoulders, between your ears. In our width, there are moments when our boundaries have been crossed. And there are some moments that we have crossed other people's boundaries. So in feeling into your width, really try to reclaim that expansiveness. Because again, we are often told to be smaller, to collapse. And at this moment, I'm going to ask everyone to take a deep breath into that center place that I acknowledged earlier. And from center, I'm going to ask us to center in our depth. And we're going to start with ancestry. Because we have came from people who survived. We carry our ancestral legacy. We carry their stories. We carry their experiences, their joy, and their trauma. And with ancestry, it's acknowledging that the people, some of the people who we love are not on this plane anymore. So if you can, I want you to imagine the hands of an ancestor at your back. Someone who loved you, someone who cared for you, who is no longer on this plane. And really feel them at your back. And as we move toward our legacy, with a heart that never stops beating, lungs that expand and contract, taking in air, a stomach that churns nutrients for the nourishment of our bodies. Let me remind everyone that everyone on this call, including myself, we will die. And in knowing that, what is the legacy that you want to leave? How do you want to be remembered? And also, what's important to you? And so I'm going to invite everyone to take a deep breath into that center. Centering in your dignity, centering in your expansiveness, and centering in both your ancestry and your legacy. So, thank you for joining in the centering practice with me. And to my panelists, I want to ask you, first of all, how are you doing? How are you arriving? What came up for you during the centering practice? But also your names and your pronouns and anything else that feels important that you want to bring into the space.
Thank you so much for that, Saifa. That was really profound for me because I straddle lots of worlds, and so I constantly feel like I need to take a break to figure out where I am in between those worlds of being a doctor and being a writer and being a parent and figuring out where because I code shift multiple times in a day, navigating those different spaces, and this type of activity really helps. But I'm Ilene, also known as IW Gregorio, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm so happy and excited to be here, especially to meet Sol for the first time, because if anyone's read that, you definitely need to read Sol's book.
And one thing I want to ask you, before we continue on the Sol, how are you feeling, Ilene?
Right now, I'm feeling really grateful that I can be with you guys, because I feel that so many that when I set out to start writing, gosh, practically 10 years ago from now. I mean, in many ways, none of the above is already incredibly dated, which is why I keep on saying over and over again that I want people to read Sol's book, because she's coming at the story from a completely different perspective than I did coming in. And so when you talk about legacy, I feel like so much of my intentions for writing None of the Above was because there was this huge gap in literature, particularly young adult literature for kids and teens and people who are coming from a very different place than people who are reading, say, Middlesex. I'm still very proud of that legacy, because in many ways it did, even though it arose from my profession of being a doctor, it changed profoundly the way I personally practice medicine and the way I interact with many of my peers. And it wasn't easy necessarily. It still remains hard. I still feel like I've placed myself into the role of an outsider, but we say it over and over again within the intersex movement that we're on the right side of history.
Oh, hell yeah. I think that's a perfect segue. So, how are you? What came up for you? Name, pronouns, and anything else?
Well, I don't think I've felt this relaxed in like 10 years, so thank you for that. That's awesome. Well, nice to meet you. I'm Sol. My pronouns are she, her. I come from Alaska, and right now I'm on the East Coast.
Dope. And is there anything else? What are you feeling right now?
That I don't want to misspeak because, as you probably know, sometimes when you speak as an intersex person, you are expected to speak for every intersex person, which is kind of strange because there's so many variations and so many different experiences. Ooh. So I'm just asking God and asking the universe to make sure that I don't say anything clumsy right now.
Ooh. I appreciate your humility, and I look forward to learning more about you, learning whatever you want to share about yourself. And I'm excited for this conversation. And yeah, I just want to introduce myself. ER gave a really great introduction. My name is Saifa. For folks in Atlanta, what's up? My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm co-founder of the Intersex Justice Project. I'm currently in school. I'm currently in England. And yeah, I'm really glad to be in this conversation with y'all. Before I ask Ilene and Sol some questions, I want to do some general education so that folks we can all be on the same page together as we have this conversation. As sort of like this definition was cultivated by activists. So intersex is a set of sex characteristics that are considered atypical for male and female. By sex characteristics, we mean hormonal, like testosterone and estrogen, chromosomal, like X, XO, XXY, gonadal, which could be ovaries, ovotestes, testicles, and genitals, which can look a myriad of different ways. That's what makes us so lovely as humans. Intersex variations occur 1 in 1.7%. That is the number that's out there. I think there's more personally. We don't really know who's intersex, but we like to say that it's as common to move away from a Eurocentric example. The Eurocentric example is red hair, but it is common as green eyes or as twins. And it's Yeah, very common. One of the most common variations is hypospadias. This is where Ilene comes in, which can be 1 in 100 sort of male identified or identified as male children. And what I want to normalize is that there's no one way to be intersex. Some of us bleed, some of us do not bleed. Some of us are able to have children, some of us are not. Some of us identify as intersex. Many of us do not, right? And I think as the dialogue expands, as the community grows, there isn't one way to be intersex. So my experience, Sol's experience, these are our experiences and they're beautiful. And there's so many experiences to be learned and to be shared. So yeah, just wanted to kind of open with that. Is there anything else that I'm missing that y'all wanted to offer?
I don't think so.
Based on being in these intersex streets. So I want to kind of open with some general broad questions. Since you're both authors, writers, I think what I want to just kind of open up with, and for the people who love to read, how did reading change your life?
How did reading not change my life? I mean, it's so interesting to hear other people's responses. But for me, so perspective on who I am. So I'm, Asian American, and I grew up in the part of upstate New York that is sort of like, how Pennsylvania has Pennsyltucky? I grew up in New York-tucky, where like everyone in my school growing up voted for the first George Bush. It was really super conservative, and I was one of 3 people of color in my entire elementary school.
Wow.
And I always felt like an alien. I always felt like an outsider, and books were my best friends growing up. Books were the things that basically created my moral code, because I actually grew up with my grandparents who were very hands-off parents. And they didn't really teach me very much, except that I need to get straight A's, become a doctor. But they never really challenged me from the perspective of my morals and my, and who I wanted to be as a person. But books are the ones that created that. And books are the way that I was able to experience things outside of my tiny, provincial town, as Belle would say, from Beauty and the Beast. I always like to say that the first gay person I ever met was in the book. And when I went into writing None of the Above, I realized that that book will be the first time that many people met intersex people as well. And so books changed my life because books were my entire life. And so I went into writing wanting to give people that sense of community, that ability to see other people and be seen, that they gave me as I was growing up. And so when I was writing None of the Above, I went into it from the perspective of a medical professional who basically, when I was in medical, so if anybody who's on this talk, knowing what Saifa just told you, you know more than I knew when I was in medical school about intersex people, okay? And so much of my discovering about things about intersex happened because of the very first intersex patient that I treated when I was during residency, where I literally knew maybe a half an hour lecture, 20-minute lecture worth of stuff. And meeting that person for the first time, it was astounding how much that revealed to me how much I didn't know. And so literally I turned to Google, right? And thank goodness for the AAS DSD support group in UK, which had this amazing website that gave me everything I needed to learn that I never learned during medical school, that I'd never even thought about. And so it was, people talk about index patients when they're doctors, like they're the doctors that change, they're the patients that change who they are as medical professionals. And that intersex patient was the patient for me. The one that made me think about things enough to want to write this book and to meet these beautiful people and to realize that we all play a role in understanding who we are, who is a species.
Ooh. Thank you, Ilene. So,
Well, everything you said is so true because your book, None of the Above, actually was the first time I read a book with an intersex character in it. I think that was like 2015, maybe 2016. And it was the library in Sitka. Everything in Sitka is called Edgecombe. So, so actually, to back it up a little bit, I had just seen Saifa on Nightline, and I remember going to my parents because we didn't talk about this growing up because I don't know how true this is, but I'm told that I was my doctor's only intersex live birth. And so that's how rural and how like isolated this community is. And so seeing Saifa on television, that was the first time I realized that this was something that occurs to like millions of people. And then I ran out to the library, and that was when I heard about your book. And like, I mean, right now this is really surreal because I remember those two incidents so clearly, and just like looking at the two of you right now, this is really surreal. It is. I can't believe it.
You know, yeah, I wanted to provide that link, you know, because I remember you reached out to me, Sol, and you were just like, I saw your Nightline piece, and I'm writing this book, and I was like, I just started my PhD program. I can't think about nothing else, you know. But I was just like, wow, it's just like amazing. Like when I talk about the community growing and expanding, it's just so, first of all, your hair is rad, you know, and also it's just like, we weren't meant to exist, you know? And I think medicine has done, I think they've done a great job of stigmatizing us for so many years, and erasing us and marginalizing us. And it's just like, when we come forward and we find each other, that sparks these mini revolutions, especially for people who are not meant to exist, you know? And so I'm just like, yes, 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 you know, like your voice, all these emerging voices, like this is what we need, right? And just to give a little bit of background, a little bit of context, so what Sol is referring to is that in 2015, I confronted the surgeon. His name is Terry Hensel. He was on staff at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York. I confronted Terry Hensel on ABC Nightline. It was funny, around the time people were like, is it Dateline or Nightline? And it was Nightline. And he was horrible. He's a flaming narcissist, and he was basically expressed no remorse for any of the surgeries that he's done. And I think for me, it was really healing to actually look him in his face. And what wasn't captured on camera, which I wish was, is that I repeated to him what he told me as a 14-year-old girl. And what he told me as a 14-year-old girl, he told me about the procedure that he was going to do. And before I say it, I want to say a trigger warning for people who are survivors of these procedures, for people who have endured any sexual assault, any sexual violation. I want to say a trigger warning. But this is what he told me as a medical professional. He said that he would shave my clitoris and that he would create a cavity inside of me. And I told him that to his face, right, as an adult. And I said, you told me this as a 14-year-old girl. Can you imagine how I literally remember feeling sick to my stomach when he told me that? And my mom saw my face and she was just like, do you want to go through with this? And I told her no. And that was the only thing that spared me from genital surgery, you know? And I think for me, it was vindicative. I don't know if that's a word, but it was vindicating that I was able to tell him that, you know? And I was just like, not all urologists, because, you know, we have Ilene, but there are some people who are monsters and who need to be stopped. from the harm that they are perpetuating.
I guess it's kind of ironic that if he weren't such a jerk, maybe he would have put it in a nicer way and he would have proceeded with the surgery. You know, that's a silver lining, but it's it's boggling, and I don't know if it's it's easy to say it's a generational thing, but you can also say that it's also something that medicine constructs with the way that medical training is, like how hierarchical it is, how like only the strong survive, to get to become surgeons and to get to become the surgeons at like places like Columbia, right? Is that they mold people into sometimes into machines. Like in surgical residency, the highest compliment you can pay a co-resident is to say that they are a machine. Where medicine is faltering and where it's hopefully learning that there are mistakes to be made is that they have spent so much of time separating doctors from their patients. And I think it's stories like the ones that we're telling that are the ones that are making this next generation of doctors into different standards, and I think that the vast majority of people who are under the age of 40 who are pediatric urologists would never do any of these surgeries, which is, thank goodness, progress. But they're still part of an institution where a lot of the people they report to, a lot of the people who are their elders, a few of them, all it takes is a handful of bad actors. And they have, I think they're still within certainly the Society of Pediatric Urology, a lot of defensiveness. And people have circled the wagons. It really has become a fraternity where they're all kind of mobilized to protect themselves and to protect their profession. And it's sad. It's sad to me as someone who has many friends who are pediatric urologists who are really wonderful people.
Well, I think just to put it in a social justice perspective, or to look at it from a social justice lens, and just from a research perspective, most of the urologists are cisgender white men over the age of like 30.
Yeah.
And so he felt very entitled to say this to me because there would be no consequences, right? Because I was a young Black girl. And so he felt nothing about carving up my young Black girl body, and I think when we look at issues around, medical accountability, it's about equity, and I think that intersex justice demands accountability, that these practitioners have to be accountable to their patients. It's not enough to just do these surgeries, but it's actually a reckoning that needs to happen.
I remember that. Yeah, no, I remember that. No, I remember that. He was like a defensive piece of garbage to your face. And what struck me was how much compassion you showed him. It was weird. I mean, like, it should have been flowing in the other direction. And you had you were empathizing with him more than he was with you. And just, I don't know. I get a little worked up. I'm sorry, but I imagine. Yeah, no, I imagine you understand for sure. But it's I don't know.
I think what you hit on. I think there's something about Paulo Freire talks about it, about this dehumanization that happens, and intersex people are dehumanized, but doctors are also dehumanized. I mean, just what you said, Ilene. This kind of robot, this kind of kind of precision, this robot, you're detached from your own humanity, especially if you're ignoring the cries of people who've been saying the same thing for decades. There has to be a dehumanization that happens, So, another question that I have for y'all is, how has writing been healing for you?
So do you want to
I'm
go?
never gonna. No, I'm never gonna go first. I'm way too like I'm way too interested in what y'all have to say.
All right.
I will go last.
I mean, writing. To be honest, I kind of hate writing. I like having written, but I hate the actual process of writing itself most of the time. But writing is a great way to find out things about myself and about my characters that, you know, this always used to seem strange to me that people be like, oh, but the character just wanted to do this. I always thought that was such bullshit before I became a writer. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you have control over what you're going to write. But that's kind of not true, because when you write, you almost become an actor. And like, if you are invested enough in that character, they will start doing things that you didn't expect. Like, they'll say something and then it sparks something else. And you'll be like, oh, that's not what I intended at all. And so that's really cool, because writing is best for me when it allows me to get myself out of my head. And when I'm able to get enough into the mind of a character that it makes me understand part of who I am myself. And so for me, one of the interesting things about writing None of the Above is that I was able to create a couple scenes where there are doctor-patient relationships, where I was able to do what I wish I had done with that intersex patient that I took care of, which I was too ignorant to be able to do at the time. And so the care with which I used, the language that I used when there, that was really healing to me, because it made me think, okay, the next time I have an intersex patient, hopefully I'll take care of them better because of that. With This Is My Brain and Love, that was completely different, because that's sort of a book that I wrote because I wanted to talk about mental illness as a spectrum. And, you know, with kids now, being able to give them a language to talk about their mental health, to talk about all the different ways that they can learn to take care of themselves, it's been really important. And so it was definitely kind of therapeutic to write that as well. Again, as a way to take myself out of the world and into another person's point of view. It's incredibly therapeutic. But the best part about writing, honestly, is just being able to talk about it with other people. Like, so I can't lie. That's why I write.
That's so interesting to me, because I feel the exact opposite. Well, I guess writing is kind of healing, because going into it, I knew that I wanted to sort of distance myself from it in a way. Like so I had to make my character a boy. I had to make my character as different from me as I could. Otherwise, I don't think I could have coped with it. And, you know, like going into it, I don't think I had anything in mind other than I want to read more books by intersex people. So I hope after I do this, more intersex people will write more books. And I don't know, it has been kind of healing in a way, because people were a lot more accepting than I thought. So for that, I'm very grateful.
Hey, Sol, I noticed that, I don't know if it was just on my end, but I noticed that at times your video was speeding up and it was breaking up a little bit. So I don't know. Okay, someone was like, I heard it too.
It's not what you said, I think, but it was a little.
Yeah, so would you mind repeating it? So, because you were saying some good stuff, but I couldn't hear it because the internet got a little weird.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It's not your fault.
What did I say?
You're saying that's the opposite. It was the opposite for you, that you write to distance yourself.
Oh yeah, right. No, the writing process was kind of healing in a way, because I made my character as different from myself as I possibly could, because having gone through some pretty intense things, I think it's more therapeutic when you're able to distance yourself from that, when you're able to see somebody else having gone through that. But as I've told a lot of people this, but the primary reason that I started writing was because there are so few books about intersex characters, especially by intersex people, that I was hoping that maybe other people would feel encouraged to start writing, and then I would have more books to read. Because I think the only book about an intersex character by an intersex author that I've read was Heat of Warrior's memoir. So I can't even think of any own voices fiction at the moment. So I would love that to change.
Yeah, there's Leanne Simon, who has written a couple of, I think one's called Proper Young Lady. I think she writes some adult books though. But I can let me paste her information in the chat.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So another question that I have for y'all, and then y'all have already been sort of talking about that, but just to get a little bit more specific, to think about like what role does identity sort of play in your narratives?
Oh, it's kind of stressful in a way because, as I'm sure you've felt many times before, you have this feeling that you want to do right by other people who are going through this experience. You don't want to speak for everybody, and you want them, at the same time, you want everybody to feel visible. So it's like a strange balancing act. Like, how do you find that middle ground? And gosh, what's his name? I think it's Inuniki Ray Marquez. I don't know if you've listened to any of his talks. Yeah, but I remember him saying something, when you've met one intersex person, you've met one intersex person. And I've been trying to keep that in mind. And again, that's another reason I'd love for there to be more own voices intersex books, because I really want to read more, and there's just not that much out there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's real.
What's so interesting, so to give you a little perspective on None of the Above and why I chose to make the main character the way that I did is, so the very first novel I wrote was a very thinly veiled autobiography about, like very thinly almost autobiographical novel about an Asian American girl growing up in upstate New York. And so this is the reason why I helped found We Need Diverse Books, because when I wrote that book, I got an agent really quickly and we went out on submission. And there were 3 separate editors from big 5 houses who said, this is too similar to another Asian American book on our list. Because at that time there was a quota. There could only be one, and things are very different now, thank God. But back then, so when I wrote None of the Above, I'm like, okay, how many intersex characters are you going to have on your list, huh? And so I deliberately whitewashed that book. Because I made Kristen a white, homecoming queen teenager, in some ways, so it could be sort of a Trojan horse, like they like to say that Orange is the New Black, the main character being a white woman going into a place that's really like prisons that are very much populated by people of color. She was sort of the Trojan horse that allows people to get into that mindset. But but I specifically made, because back then, if I had made this person intersex and Asian or Black or whatever, it would have been considered too much diversity, right? So luckily things have changed. They are a lot more accepting of intersectionality. But I have to bring that up as a way to point out how for so many years identity was very singular, and that literature didn't allow the space to allow people who are either people of color and or of different gender or sexual identities to honor all aspects of that space, which is why it was really important for me when I wrote This Is My Brain and Loved, is to make sure that they were people of color, because especially talking about the role of race in discussion of mental illness is incredibly important right now.
Yeah.
Well, I might be saying this wrong because I'm awful. Intersectionality in publishing, do you feel that it's improved enough, or do you think it still has like a long way to go?
I think it's much better. I guess particularly in young adult literature or kids literature, because of We Need Diverse Books. There are books. My people who are, for instance, my friends who are, for instance, trans and people of color, Case and Calendar has gotten a lot of support from the publishing world. Obviously tempered. Adam Silvera is a queer person of color. Aiden Thomas, who wrote Cemetery Boys, is a trans person of color. So I feel like it's a lot better than it used to be. Doesn't mean that it's perfect. And there's always room for more, and you know, there, you can always say that they could promote those people more, but certainly better than it was 7 or 8 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oof. I have two very specific questions for each panelist. And I want to start with you, Ilene. So you talk about, you know, being a urologist. You're still practicing, right?
Yep.
And is your focus pediatrics, or you work with adults?
I work with adults.
Okay.
Exclusively. So, I mean, that in some ways, that has been my safe space to be able to talk about a lot of these issues, because like I'm not directly in opposition with pediatric urologists. And I would say that a lot of adult urologists don't realize what's going on in pediatrics clinics. And it's a shock to some of them that they're like, oh, these procedures still happen? I mean, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So have you, in being an adult, you know, working in adult urology, have you come across sort of patients who have been, you know, who have had a lot of surgeries related to hypospadias repair?
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, so I definitely have one patient who had not only a very complicated hypospadias repair as a child, but also had a bilateral orchiectomy. They, you know, have, you know, sort of lived their lives knowing that they would continue to have fistulas and issues. And, you know, I've been called in to do procedures on them with other things when they need to have a catheter, for instance. I also have an 85-year-old man who had severe hypospadias.
Wow.
Who was lucky enough to avoid surgery.
Oh, wow.
And so he actually shared with me his memoir. Like, he wrote a memoir about how he had difficult times, but at the same time, he, you know, became a lawyer, happily married, you know. I mean, he didn't need to have the surgery, you know.
So if you, sorry.
No.
So if you can do me a favor, if you could define for people who may or may not have sort of like experience with medicine, because I know you do this all the time. So if you could define urology, if you can also define hypospadias, and then I'm going to go into the question I want to ask you.
Absolutely. Okay. So hypospadia, so I'm a urologist, so I deal with the kidneys and bladder and the male reproductive system, and sort of also female incontinence issues. And hypospadias is when, okay, this is the penis, guys. Okay. So where usually the tip of the penis is right at the end, right? But in 1 out of 100 times, the tip is a little bit further down, maybe there where like the head of the penis is. Sometimes it's way down, like at the level of the scrotum, or even below the scrotum, called like perineal hypospadias. And so in the old days, that was considered to be a problem because the kid can't pee standing up. Oh no! And really, that's one of the main downsides of it. Also, there's the idea that that kid won't be able to inseminate someone the normal way. And so for a long time, medicine tried to figure out how to repair this. And it's a really, really horrible, complicated repair that sometimes involves skin grafts, multiple surgeries with a very, very high complication rate. You know, it's controversial to this day, and for many pediatric urologists, it remains a challenge and something that they're trying to examine how much actually needs to be done these days. I mean, medicine constantly evolves, and so there are certainly points now where when the tip is just there, they're realizing they don't really need to repair it. And so again, it's a way in which medicine is evolving, right? But there are still a lot of people who are very aggressive in treating hypospadias and who don't necessarily, you know, it's hard. I know as a surgeon, it's really hard to give full informed consent, because you can always kind of gloss over things and things say like, oh, this probably won't happen. And you can, I've heard surgeons say that, given the right words, you could persuade someone to do anything. But what's the, what's the right answer in a lot of these situations? No one really knows, and it's a very personal decision.
Right. So the question I want to ask is sort of seeing these patients who have had multiple surgeries, and you work in advocacy, right? You work with Interact. I'm pretty sure you have interacted with former patients. You have heard testimonies of patients. So my question to you is, what has been the toll and the emotional toll that it has taken on you?
On me?
Yeah.
The advocacy, the toll the advocacy has taken, or the toll
No,
being
just hearing
just
these
hearing stories.
stories.
Oh, okay. Hearing these stories, it's devastating. It's always devastating because, you go into medicine thinking you're going to help people. But then to realize that there's an entire branch of medicine where patients have, for the most part, been harmed, mostly because the focus has been on treating a surgical problem rather than, a psychosocial one. And that's the thing that terrifies and horrifies me the most, is how medicine has gone wrong in the way that they treat people's bodies rather than their souls. And again, that's why I write, because for me, writing and reading is such an important way to repair the soul and to understand the whole of a person. And it's something that has, again, allowed me to become a better doctor whenever I give consent, even though I'm in a hurry. Even if I'm doing something as simple as a vasectomy, I'm pretty straightforward about how most people are okay, but some aren't, and you have to be able to live with that. And so many intersex kids, they were never given that information, that support. They were just told, this is what's got to happen. And that the decisional regret that not only the kids but their parents have is enormous. And I understand that pressure placed on parents now too, as a parent.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So, I think it's always profound to be in conversation with other intersex folks, because as we were talking about before this panel began, I think for the people who are aware of intersex folks, people are curious, although they may not ask. They're curious about our genitals. They're curious about the surgeries that we might have had. They're curious about our trauma, and I think what I've seen, having been in the movement for a while, is that what has been consistent is that intersex people have shared their stories, but have also shared their trauma for decades, right? And I think that has inspired legislation in certain countries. Like I know Germany just banned surgeries, but that's complicated. I know Malta was the first country in Europe, if not the world, to outright ban surgeries. So I think these testimonies do influence policy, as sometimes at very small levels. And I think as part of healing, as a part of coming back towards some degree of wholeness, I'm curious about the story that's inside of you and the story that you want to tell and not the story that you have to tell. So what is that story?
Well, I think the story that I've experienced has mostly been, and I'm not blaming my parents, I'm not blaming my community, nothing like that, but it's mostly been one of isolation because growing up, I can't remember ever not knowing that I was born differently. But my parents, they very clearly did not want to talk about it. They were embarrassed by it. And you grow up with that, you internalize that, you feel like, did I do something wrong? But when did I do this? When did I do the wrong thing? What can I do to fix it? And, you know, seeing your segment and reading Ilene's book and then actually reaching out and trying to find people near me who are intersex, you know, that's when you start to realize there's nothing wrong with you, because look at all these beautiful people you're meeting. There's nothing wrong with them. So how can there be something wrong with you? And I definitely don't want to focus on the trauma because, you know, we've all been through it. And no, you know what? I was thinking about that earlier, like all the hardships you've been through and everything that must have taken such a toll on you. But in part because of that, we have the progress that we have now. And I know I'm so grateful to that. And I just wish it didn't take all those hardships. But maybe that can be where we're heading, where we don't have to go through that anymore. We've already seen the worst of it. Now we can just talk about the best of it.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like comparatively, I feel like as more folks sort of emerge, you know, it's just, you know, I think there are stories of just horrific accounts. And I also feel like, you know, compared to when, you know, I'm thinking of when the Intersex Society of North America first began in 1993, people were very, very traumatized, right? Because there was no awareness of intersex anything. Mm-hmm. And them sharing their stories was immediately shut down by physicians, right? And so they literally had to create, and I want to be specific, the Intersex Society of North America in the United States, right? Because I don't want to, you know, I want to be mindful of the global community. But in the United States, like folks were really devastated, and rightfully so, right? And I think part of, as we seek justice for what has happened, I think there has to be some sort of reparations for people who have been harmed, right? Because I think there's a generation of people who were very, very harmed, and medicine has to account for that. And so, yeah. Well, those are all the questions that I have. You know, I just wanted, before we get to the questions that folks may have in the chat, I wanted to know if, you know, you and Ilene have sort of any closing thoughts, feelings that you wanted to share.
Well, I'm just so grateful to the both of you, and like I never thought that I would have the opportunity to actually say thank you, but thank you, and that's all that's on my mind.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for making me realize that there really was a point in writing that book, and it's no better gift that you can give an author, as you'll soon find out. I think that you'll change a lot of lives with that book.
Thank you.
Yo, and thank you for writing, Sol. Like, that's so brave, you know? Like, and if that hair is any indication of what you're going to bring into the world, you know, I know it's going to be fire. You know what I'm saying?
No, it's an amazing book. You'll love it, Saifa.
Oh, that's what's up. Ilene.
It's you know, in the pandemic, it's been really hard to keep up with these communities. You know, there aren't, you know, meetings and conferences and chances to realize that we are not alone, and that there's a lot of support. There are other urologists who support intersex justice more than you think, and there are certainly a growing group of doctors of all kinds, gynecologists, endocrinologists who are stepping up to the plate. I mean, Ellie Kim at Lurie, Francis Grimstead. I mean, there are some powerhouses out there. This is an amazing time to be an intersex activist. As it does take a toll on people though. So you're right, Saifa, that the people from ISNA, the initial activists, it was an incredibly hard thing for them to do, and we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. We're all progressing, and I think it's continuing to move on. And my computer might die, so I apologize. I need to let my husband to bring my here. I'll toggle off my video so I can get my charger.
Well, I was gonna say y'all have actually come perfectly to the end of the time. So you're right on the money. We did have one question in the chat asking if you could just give a quick summation of your novels. So I'm wondering, Ilene, maybe you could do that first before
my battery dies. So None of the Above is the story of a girl who finds out when she's 17 that she was born intersex. So a lot of people who are intersex don't find out until much later in life because their diagnoses are concealed from them. And so that was the case for my main character. And so the reader goes on the process of discovery with the main character, which is probably apropos given the fact that I am not myself intersex. But the plot of the story is about what happens when her best friend leaks her secret to the entire school and how she learns to find acceptance and love after this.
Oh gosh. I got so engrossed I forgot. So Just Ash, it takes place in Salem, Massachusetts. So it's an intersex boy growing up in contemporary Salem. And his parents have always sort of disagreed about how to raise him, but he was assigned male at birth, and that's how he's been raised. But I guess he's about 16 when they discover he actually has more female parts. And his parents think, well, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we should see if you're actually meant to be a girl. And it's sort of like comparing what intersex people go through today to like a modern day witch hunt of sorts. And I guess that's it. Yeah.
That's dope. Yo, I look forward to checking it out. Checking it out. I know that there are no other questions that I can see. I know ER, you just like, we're at time. He popped right back on.
Yeah, well, I just want to honor all of y'all's time and everybody who's with us today and just say thank you so much. I do want to encourage folks to buy both of your books. The links are in the chat. They're also, you can click this teal button here to buy these books and more from Charis. So there are other books that feature intersex characters out there. We also put some nonfiction books on this list. So just some more resources, and the list grows every year. And we're always, if folks who are watching, want to know more, you can always reach out to us. And Saifa, I was wondering if you just want to drop any links in the chat to the work that you're doing, because
I do.
Yeah,
I just did a poster collaboration with the trans artist Micah Bazant. And yes, so I would just ask for people, if you can, it would be great if you can buy a poster, because it's just beautiful. And it was just such a sweet labor of love. And working with Micah was a dream. So I was like, yay, love this for everybody. So yes, Jesus Christ, when you need to find something, just bear with me one moment.
And for folks who follow Charis's social media, we shared it on all of our platforms this morning, the poster. So
yes.
But Saifa's going to put it in the chat. So
I am.
We have the actual link.
Yes.
While he's doing that, I'm going to let you know that we're going to be adding captions to this. and putting it on our YouTube channel. So that's a great way to share it as well, because we'd love for more folks to watch this and learn more.
Great.
Cool. All right.
Amazing.
Well, thank you all so much. Have a happy Pride. And stay safe and well.
Yo, thank y'all. Lovely. Please keep in contact. Thank y'all for the work that you're doing. Thank you, Charis. Y'all are amazing. And I'll probably try to drop by when I'm in Atlanta in August. So
Yay.
Yay.
Yeah.
It's great to see
right.
all your smiling faces and to hang out with you guys.
That would be awesome.
Hey.